Уважаемые дамы и господа, дорогие
Dear
друзья,
ladies and gentlemen, dear friends,
dear friends, from my point of view, today we are discussing with the expert community of the world a very interesting and very important topic connected with the development of online education. The exact name is online education, a temporary solution or a panacea or long-term trend. And to those people who participated in this discussion, you saw their portraits, you saw their biographies or CVs. They are outstanding specialists. Today, we were discussing the topic with Tim Mescon, the first vice president of AACSB International, the biggest association of business schools of the world, accreditation association, with Professor Nick Van Dam from EE Business School, Spain, that is considered to be #1 in the world from the point of view of online education. We're discussing that with the acting rector of Sberbank or Sber Corporate University, Igor Baranov, who has a long experience of consultancy work, education work, and now is running the biggest corporate university of the country. And we're discussing that with fantastic dean from the United States, the dean of business school of Wake Forest University, North Carolina, Professor Charles Iacovou. The topic is really very interesting. What would happen with online education 1 month after the end of pandemic? Shall we continue to use this opportunity as intensively as now, or will it completely disappear? What do we think about the new generation and online education? How to adapt online education to executive retraining? Online education, it's the same quality and price level, the same market niche, or something different, and how to market those problems, and a lot of other very important questions. And it is my pleasure and honor to give the first floor to the Vice President of AACSB International, Professor Tim Mescon. Tim, you're welcome. If you please switch on the sound. We cannot hear you. We cannot hear you.
Okay, spasibo bolshoy. Sergey, thank you very much, and a pleasure to be with such distinguished colleagues today. I'm going to move very quickly through this because my colleagues have such important insights to share, and I'm going to talk about where we see the future of virtual education. First, it's important for all of us to know that change is the norm. This is the world of higher ed, but this is also the universe that we all live in today. And so change is inevitable and impacts everything that we are doing. When AACSB talks about world-class business schools, we talk about it in terms of these 5 categories, one of which is we must be catalysts for innovation. We must, as well as we must be co-creators of knowledge and hubs of lifelong learning. We are leaders in research on leadership, but also at the end of the day, all of us in business education focus on enhancing, enabling global prosperity. Sergey, the 5 questions we were asked to respond to are these, and I'm going to give really quick responses and then provide a little bit more detail. The future of virtual education after COVID. Virtual education will remain strong and robust and even more present in higher education moving forward. Can virtual education compete? I believe unquestionably so. I'm going to talk about Gen Z and their demands. Executive students are different. very challenged with the virtual platform, but our business schools have responded to provide engagement, interaction in a very sophisticated level. And I think executive education will grow as well in the virtual space. And then about marketing, face-to-face versus virtual, without losing market share. I believe there are 6 technologies with the power to disrupt business schools in the future, and you see these here. All of these impact virtual education, but particularly customized delivery of education, whether it's at the program level or at the module, at the course level, and then the power of micro-learning, of driving virtual education to the smartphone in a very sophisticated way. Let me talk briefly about Gen Z. This is our current university population today for traditional age students born in the mid-1990s. It's a huge population globally, but Gen Z demands technology, is expecting sophisticated applications, and the virtual learning world is made to meet the needs of Gen Z in so many ways. I'm going to stop right there. Sergey, this is a fantastic topic, one that I think will engender great conversation among my colleagues, and look forward to hearing what they have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you. I consider, first of all, we shall listen to all the speakers, and then maybe I shall ask you some extra questions. And now it's my pleasure to give floor to the acting rector of Sberbank Russia, Professor Igor Baranov.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Myasoedov. And well, back to your question. Of course, we experienced a big push to online education this year, and probably 3 trends worth to mention. First of all, there was what I call technology revolution in our team. Ability to use very different instruments, not just Zoom. Zoom is everything, of course, but Zoom plus many instruments which are positioned globally or nationally here in Russia, and that create overall engaged atmosphere for students. And I think, it's very important to learn. There was also a change in attitude of our participants. So in a sense, they learned how to learn online. Their prejudices about online education probably disappeared because of their new experience. They're more ready to go on with this online education in a sense. Second thing, of course, there is a big splash for reskilling programs, and this is very important. And something very interesting that we noted, we started a program which we call Reboot. And basically it's a reskilling program when you can gain knowledge of one of the IT professions. It meant to be for people who want probably to change their profession, being a clerk probably now and become a data scientist. But interestingly enough, majority of people who enrolled for this program want to stay in their current role. The thing is that their current role is changing really fast. So to stay like myself in HR, and HR is digitized now, I need to learn data science just to be competitive in my current position. So we see this, a huge splash in demand for reskilling just to stay relevant in your current profession, in your current occupation. And third, of course, unique opportunities to reach out participants across all countries possible. We are operating in Sberbank in all regions of Russia, and it's quite important for us to be available to our participants in different regions. And also, we can reach out to the best professors, like those who are participating here in this session. So I think these 3 things really made a difference for us. And we see it in feedback from our participants. So surprisingly, we measure a number of things like NPS, CSI, this kind of stuff. And surprisingly, this year, these KPIs are actually higher than they used to be last year. So we're actually even debating probably we should not go back to campus. I'm kidding. But, you know, it's a different world, and I think we adopted, and our participants adopted to that as a long-term solution.
You know, the sociological department of RANEPA made a research during the beginning of this pandemic isolation, and the majority of students and faculties mentioned that they are dreaming to return back to the university campus, personal communication, face-to-face, etc. However, after the break in isolation that was at the end of summer, September, beginning of October, when they returned back to their classes and then to isolation again, during the poll we found out that their mood was changed, and the quantity of people who mentioned that even in future we prefer to preserve some part of our classes online went up. Do you think that this trend would continue?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think we are kind of trying to find a new balance between offline and face-to-face modules. It's not going to be pure online. It's not Panacea in this sense. It's not going to stay face-to-face, predominantly face-to-face as it used to be. There should be a new balance. It's difficult to find. It's difficult to find on our side as faculty members, because if we have nothing to teach except for, you know, just giving information to our students, it's becoming even more clear when you do it online. So it's a challenge for professors as well.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Professor Van Dam, can I kindly ask you to join our discussion? I remember your last year's presentation in depth about lifelong learning, about balance of life and work, about the middle age crisis. And now pandemic pushed into those topics, this online education. What's your perception about the opportunities and challenges?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'm delighted to join the panel here today. Yeah, so if I reflect again on, you know, where we are in the world and what we have learned over the last let's say 10 months, is that you know, we are still at the beginning of the fourth industrial revolution, and over the next decades there is a huge need for upskilling and reskilling every single person globally. If we look at careers of students, of professionals, a 40+ year career, people need to continue learn and grow. They need to develop lifelong learning mindsets. And if we reflect on our education system globally, you know, people need to double down in all their learning, if it's, you know, if they are in the workforce or as students. And what I believe is that, you know, if you look at technologies, and Sergey, you mentioned it at the beginning, the term e-learning was coined in 1997. So we are now kind of, you know, 23 years later. And I believe that, you know, technology-based learning, digital learning is here to stay. It can have a huge opportunity for people to do more when it comes to learning. But also when I reflect on universities, on business schools, you know, we have different segments in the market. We have the undergraduates, we have graduates, and we have executive education. And within those segments, we have different archetype of students. So at the undergraduate level, we have students who say, I like to work and learn. And for those, a blended model, an online model works really well. But also we have an archetype of students who say, I truly value being on a campus because it's also part of my development. I want to connect with people live. But saying that, also there are tremendous opportunities to use technology in the classroom, outside of the classroom, etc. That will be here to stay, and we will double down on that. And from a graduate perspective, well, we see already that, and if I take IE as an example, at IE, 70% of all our master degrees are blended. So that means actually we're using technology, and we will double down on that. And then if you look at the executive education market, and I've been in touch with many CLOs through the IE Center for Corporate Learning Innovation, through the McKinsey Consortium for Learning Innovation. And what I'm learning from executives like Igor in the corporate world is that, yes, online learning will become a big part of executive education, and there's still a need for people to come together and in a place where they can practice their skills, when they feel they are part of a culture, they can do networking, but also time for reflection. We all know that people, and particularly leaders, need time for reflection. And there's also, if I couple this with another trend, people will be working more remotely than ever before. But therefore, the need for people, if they can come together to make that a very immersive experience, becomes even more important than ever before. And the last point I'd like to make is that I think we have tremendous opportunities to advance our faculties and help them to use digital pedagogies, blended pedagogies, to make them, even better in how they are teaching. So teaching excellence, is what I believe, is becoming more and more important, no matter what kind of level program people are teaching.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nick. You see, yesterday, when we were making the discussion about self-isolation at another session on business education, the Dean of London Business School mentioned that when they started introducing their online programs to top executives, initially some of the top executives were reluctant to follow, but then when pandemic continued, they decided to subdivide people into smaller groups to increase interactive approach, and the quantity of these people started growing. Before I shall ask the next question, I want to ask the question to those people who are present at our discussion, to those people who are our audience. The question is very simple. Do you consider that online format is as effective as normal in-class format? There can be three answers. Yes, online can be equal by the efficiency with in-class format. No, it won't never be as efficient as the first one, or I do not know. And we shall wait for the results of the voting, which we get after some time. And now I want to give floor to Charles Iacovou from the University of Wake Forest. Charles, may I ask you a little bit more precise question? My observation is that, at least here in Russia, that the people from corporate programs are less reluctant to follow online than the people from online enrollment. That the people from MPA programs are less reluctant to follow online than the people from MBA programs. Can you comment why it is so, and outline some of your observations? How is it at your continent? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. It is so wonderful to see you and be with the esteemed panelists that I see on the screen. I will respond to your question, but let me say the exchange that we have today, it's a good proof point that online education is working. I am learning a lot from you today. And I'm really sorry that I'm not able to be physically with you in Moscow like we have done in the past, but certainly that learning is happening, and thank you for organizing this wonderful event again. Back to the question you asked, let me answer that question, and then I will highlight and affirm some of the points that the colleagues have just made. It is true that not all the learners are the same. So we have said, Tim has shared that in general, younger students tend to prefer digital education, or they're more comfortable with it. They're digital natives, the undergraduates that we have right now. True. We have thousands of research studies that show that based on innovation, diffusion of innovation, that in general, younger people adopt technologies in medicine, in farming, in manufacturing, in education faster. But that is not the only factor that determines someone's proclivity, preference towards a new technology. Life's circumstances, ability to give up a job, lose a salary, ability to be mobile, to go to the classroom in certain hours. So back to the question you asked, Sergey, if you think about typical learners that pursue those programs, they tend to be more senior working professionals, that they have probably more senior jobs and more established career paths and families and kids to take care of. So those life circumstances make it more difficult for them to be physically present in a highly constrained program arrangement. And therefore, they see online as a more flexible channel for them. MBA students, for example, we have some executives who find themselves in those situations, but we also have more junior learners who are willing to give up more junior jobs and lower incomes with lower opportunity costs, and therefore those students tend to prefer face-to-face. So here's a case where actually age plays against that preference, which can explain the dynamic you just described. So we notice it here as well in our own region, where certain type of student, goes back to the segmentation point that Nick made earlier, certain type of students beyond their age demographic has a preference for more flexible arrangements, and flexibility tends to come with online distance technology versus cohort-based face-to-face programming. In addition to that, let me say something about acceptance of programs. Just like every culture out there, some cultures embrace new technology faster than others. Medicine versus business versus airlines versus banking or countries, it doesn't matter. And in the past, let's acknowledge that online education has not had a good reputation. And I will submit there were 3 key reasons for it. The technologies were not perfected. As Nick said, actually even before the 90s, we had distance education. We had open universities in the 80s and 70s. They were sending tapes back and forth and mail correspondence courses. Those technologies were not as good. And the delivery and the learning benefits were not as good. So that was a problem. The second thing that was happening over the years is most universities that engage in distance education, were not our best universities. So sometimes the observations about online education were more a judgment about the type of university that was involved versus the delivery method. Today, that has changed. We have premier universities like yours and all of the ones that are presented on the screen that they're delivering through online delivery. So that's changing the perception. The third factor that I think created a liability for online delivery early on is bias. If I had to go to class and that's how I learn, then if somebody doesn't, by definition, that must be inferior. And I have to tell you that bias was not just only in the corporate settings, it was in the educational settings. Ourselves, we felt that those were inferior delivery mechanisms. But research shows that learning outcomes can be equivalent across delivery channels. Now, that doesn't mean online means good teaching and on ground means bad teaching. No, there is good teaching happening online and good teaching happening on ground. And I will submit there is bad teaching that is happening in both spaces. So the trick is to leverage the strengths of your physical assets, your digital assets, and optimize the learning. And you cannot replicate it. You cannot replicate in online a casual lunch conversation with your teammates that just happens sporadically and organically. But at the same time, you cannot replicate the asynchronous flexibility that the online technology delivers in a 90-minute classroom session. So there is benefits across that make it difficult. So what do we do? Let me just focus briefly on the future and highlight some of the things that have already been said. One is segmentation. Not all learners are the same, and we need to know that and match delivery, and program design features, not just delivery, with the needs of the learners. And that has been articulated. The second thing we can do is take the best pieces of the delivery method and try to make the other method, because both methods have liabilities, even better. Why not take online content that has been delivered for your online programs and give it to your on-ground students so that they can have the textbook, they can have the videos, they can have the online websites, and they can match that to their learning styles and be more effectively taught the topic. Why not use the alumni of your on-ground programs in various cities across Russia and the world to engage with your online learners and give them personal engagement so they're not as isolated, especially in a moment like this during the pandemic. So why not take pieces and make it together? And the last thing that I want to say is, I think by mixing delivery channels, online versus traditional, with business models, we're doing ourselves a disservice. And we need to stop talking about online learners and on-ground. Why not talk about online semesters and on-ground semesters? Why not talk about course-by-course basis? Why also not talk about changing the faculty roles? Why does the same person must design a course, deliver the instruction, be the advisor during office hours, and also do the assessment? Why not use some pieces online, some on-ground, and create a different teaching environment for us? So re-engineering, rethinking, re-envisioning, I think it needs to be one of our key strategies. Sorry for giving a long answer, but I wanted to affirm many of the things that have been shared and tell you that I'm really excited, and I too am optimistic about the future of online delivery.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Charles. And now, gentlemen, I have one a little bit provocative question, and with the reference to what Charles has just mentioned. He mentioned that, if I got the message properly, that to make our online education as effective and efficient as our ground or in-class education, we have to remember about segmentation of our clients. Because different groups of clients, they prefer a different way of education. And the younger people are more adaptive to the education online. That is, well, I quite agree with that. However, I have a philosophical question. Recently, I read several articles connected with the world marketing of luxury commodities, and then the people mentioned that the top brands like Prada, like Dior, etc., practically switched off all the TV screens at their shops. They stopped using gadgets by their salesmen and sales ladies. They say that their clients prefer face-to-face, personal, one-to-one conversation and work, that they subconsciously consider that too much of gadgetization and online communication brings you to mass products which are normally sold at the discounted market. And here, I can feel a certain threat to the value of education as it is. If online is going so quickly forward, won't we get certain segregation of the people into two groups? Those who had a chance or will have a chance in the future to study in class, on the ground, and those who would be predominantly using online. And I would be very, very thankful if you tell what do you think about that. You're welcome, gentlemen. Who is ready to comment?
I will respond very quickly. I agree. This is about segmentation. So there are instances where personal engagement face-to-face is perceived to be more intimate, more personal, more higher quality for certain segments. And I will submit that is the best way to engage with your client. And that applies to education. I mean, we have a one-on-one coaching that we offer to executive students. That's a much more expensive model than teaching large classes, but we still offer it because that is what is needed for the development and other needs of our learners. So yeah, I don't view this to be a one-size solution that fits all, and I will submit that there will be a segment, a premier segment, both in terms of pricing, investments that require to deliver it, that will stay in that space. So I think that was a great analogy you gave, and I think that'll be part of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Thank
And if
you
I
very
may,
much.
may I chime in too? I think that let's say for both archetypes, the archetype online and the archetype in class or on campus, we also see there can be a significant difference in terms of the experience and the quality. So you can have an outstanding, very well designed online experience. And I published an article this year with a McKinsey colleague on this. And the theme was how to convert a classroom program into a high quality immersive online learning program. And we featured a whole methodology in terms of how to do this. Now, the same applies for in the class. You can have an outstanding experience in the class, but also you can have an okay experience in the class. So it goes back to segmentation, pricing, audience, and also where do you want to be from a quality perspective?
Yeah, and Sergey, I would jump in on that and say I agree wholeheartedly with both Charles and Nick. Our platforms of delivery must be incredibly agile, flexible, and must be able to address the range of expectations and demands. And most importantly, what we do, whether it's completely virtual, exclusively face-to-face, or blended, must be high quality and always experiential. And you know, one of the things you just mentioned a few minutes ago, a survey with the audience. It's a perfect example of embedding experiential engagement into a virtual experience. And our schools are getting much better at this, much more sophisticated at this. And frankly, the markets, whether it's at the bachelor's level or the executive level, they're demanding it. So as my colleagues have said, we must continue to push our business schools, push our professors around excellence and flexibility in responding to the ever-changing demands of different market segments.
Thank you very much, team. Thank you. And with your permission, I'm sorry to pull a little bit my colleague, Professor Baranov, from his condition of comfort. I know that Sberbank is working with top executives, with top bankers, and creating ecosystem of the country is working with millions and millions of very good ordinary people. What's your feeling about the segmentation when you're using the methods, instruments, and formats of online education?
You know, I certainly agree with what was said already. But in addition, probably we should mention that there is segmentation already. It was before the pandemic. In a sense, this trend, the top providers started to consider online education seriously. They're much more involved in online education. Actually, this trend became top education more available to people, because this segmentation is not only based on perception to education, I wanted to do it online or on ground, but also on financial resources available. So I think, you know, we actually make education more available to the sense. But we should also remember that considering this idea of putting different pieces, as it was mentioned, I totally agree with that. But learning is not the only piece that we should consider and probably drop into two smaller pieces. In corporate education, at least, corporate university is also a place where you absorb corporate culture, where you develop your unique network that will help you in your career, in your development, in your projects across the company. And finally, it's a point for ideation, where innovation actually might be born. How small they are. Maybe we just agree, you know, sitting in one class, this is a nice idea, we should do something about it. in our divisions. We should probably cooperate. So this opportunity for networking, for idea exchange, for idea generation should be somehow kept in online delivery, or should be probably kept in combination of online delivery and delivery on the ground.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dear friends, I just want to inform you about the results of our voting. I shall remember you. The question was whether online education can be as effective and efficient as in-class or ground education, and there were 3 versions of reply. Yes, it can. No, it cannot. I do not know. So those people who voted yes, it can, creates 55% of our audience. Pretty high figure. I expected it to be a little bit lower. Those who answered no, it won't, 20%, and 25% declared we do not know. Thank you very much for our for the people who are following our discussion, for their participation in the voting. And I want to ask to the esteemed experts one more question. It is pretty simple. When I'm trying to following the psychology of GZ, of the Generation Z, very often I do not understand them completely. And just recently, a small story, during the New Year, with my family and friends of our family outside of Moscow in the open air, we had a celebration and small test, and we're asking questions about the Soviet time fields. The younger generation reacted positively, but when I started asking questions about Harry Potter, the elder generation could answer nothing, and the younger generation knew everything. And I found out that the characters, the values, differ very much, and that we, the elder generation, not often feel them. And so the question, again connected with the marketing. Today, in the Russian market, we have a wave of junk MBA programs, very inexpensive, for $300, $400, so-called MBA programs. In fact, this is, well, creation of some self-awareness about that management exists. Very inexpensively, very aggressive, and directed to that generation. And to the extent I know, as the president of RABE, the turnover of this market is high and it is growing. What's your feeling? Does it mean that in future the new generation would start looking for some simplification of getting knowledge, to some simplified programs which are less expensive, to getting knowledge by small pieces and then returning to that? What is happening? It seems to be that previously we didn't have this phenomena.
Well, Sergey, I'll jump in very quickly. I think Gen Z is very keenly aware of the need to constantly upgrade their skills and their competencies. And they're looking continuously, as are so many others, with credentials, with badges, with acknowledgement of continuous learning. And at the end of the day, above and beyond our degrees, what matters is what we can do. And oftentimes this is validated through these additional credentials. And I think in this response, quality wins out. And that while some may migrate to no quality, horribly inexpensive, quick fixes, if it doesn't raise skill levels or competency levels, there's no gain. And so at the end of the day, I fully believe that high quality, continuous improvement wins almost every time.
Thank you very much, Tim. Yeah. I want to believe that too. And well, I hope you're completely right. We have extra 2 minutes for very short one extra comment. Welcome, gentlemen.
I'm more.
Yes, please.
Go ahead, Charles. Go ahead, Charles.
Thank you. I will say again that there's opportunities to enrich what we do with online education, as Tim said, through experiential learning to drive quality up. So let me just give an example of where I've seen it as part of the pandemic. At my school at Wake Forest University, we were concerned that people would be isolated, like you said, Sergey. So we introduced a brand new course when the pandemic happened that allowed our students to do consulting in their local communities, wherever they were, and work with local organizations while they were studying remotely. Because we knew that some students will feel comfortable going out there and they wanted that personal interaction. So here's the situation where we drove up the quality of the experience, we drove up the learning outcomes by using online technology that we didn't even choose by choice to have in that moment. So I think the potential is really high for driving the quality and experiential learning in the future. And I'm excited to be working with you, learning from you about how to do that better.
Thank you very much, Charles. I'm afraid, Nick, 30 seconds, very quickly.
30 seconds, yeah. Well, one comment. Well, I have a son who's Gen Z, and he is, very digital savvy, and he appreciates it a lot to be on campus in class with his, with his friends. Second comment: in the Netherlands, there have been student protests this year from students between 18 and 22, and they say we want to go back to class. We don't want to have online learning, and it's not about that all the online learning was poor per se. I think it was overall, it was fine. However, people still beyond, being online, they still want to be together. And I call it high tech, high touch. We need to do both, right? And if we can do both and we can do it really well for different archetypes, we have outstanding education.
Thank you very, very much. Gentlemen, unfortunately, our time is coming to the end. Tim, Nick, Igor, Charles, thank you very, very much for your participation. I do hope to continue our discussion next year at Gaidar Forum, but alive on the ground. I'm all for digital learning. However, I would be very happy to see you here alive and would be very happy to show you a little bit of new, enlightened and beautiful Moscow. Thank you very much. Take care. Be healthy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, coronavirus is still around. I wish you all the best. Thank you very, very
Thank you.
much.
All the best. Bye. Thank you. It was a pleasure.